Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's special Committee of the Whole meeting and City Council meeting. This Committee of the Whole meeting is called to order. Let the record show that all the aldermen, save for Alderman McGowan, who is visiting family in Germany, are present this evening. Let's begin this meeting, if I may, with a moment of silence to recognize the loss of a distinguished businessman here in town. All of you received an email from me over the weekend regarding the loss of Mr. Richard Dick Matson, former owner of Matson Jewelers. I learned by talking to the family that Mr. Matson purchased the building on South Street when he was 55 years old, after opening the business in St. Charles back in 1957, and used, dare I say this, child labor, all four of his kids, to help redo the building. And now that building, as you all know, stands as Margaret Matson Jewelers, and is obviously a very successful and going concern. So on behalf of the children, certainly Mrs. Matson, the children, Tom and John and Charlie and Margaret, we ask just for a moment of silence to honor Mr. Matson and to let the family know that we're thinking about them. Thank you, everyone. Again, this is a special Committee of the Whole meeting, ladies and gentlemen. Our items of business, item 2A, is to consider resolution number 2019-40, approving a tax increment financing redevelopment agreement between the City of Geneva and the Chaudine Family Foundation for a planning charrette and entitlement project, and authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with Hitchcock Design Group to facilitate said planning charrette and entitlement project. Is there a motion to put this on the floor? So moved. Motion by Marks.
Second.
Seconded by Bruno. This matter is on the floor. We will have a brief summary by City Administrator Dawkins, and then we'll begin the conversation.
And my introduction will be a little bit longer than normal, so bear with me. The city approached the Chaudine Family Foundation about a possibility of joining efforts to host a planning charrette for the former mill race in site. This would be an exercise to facilitate community consensus to design for the future retail, lodging, residential, and/or mixed-use redevelopment of the property. There's no preconceived plan for the redevelopment of this site, except that the development must serve as an attractive gateway into downtown Geneva and maximize the riverfront as an accessible community asset. In December, a joint request for proposals was released, and a total of 6 proposals were received. Through telephone and in-person interviews, city staff and representatives of the Chaudine Family Foundation identified Hitchcock Design Group as the preferred consultant to facilitate a planning charrette and entitlement process for the redevelopment of the site. For those who don't know, a charrette is essentially a planning process that employs an iterative process over 5 separate days to open to the public. At the end of the initial 5-day process, the exercise will have developed a mutually agreed upon use and strategy for the site's redevelopment. Hitchcock Design Group will then refine the product and begin the entitlement process. The resolution being considered this evening is to approve a redevelopment agreement between the City of Geneva and the Chaudine Family Foundation and authorize execution of a contract with Hitchcock Design Group to facilitate this process. The property is located in the Geneva Tax Increment Financing District Number 3. The purpose of this redevelopment project area is to support public and private development, strengthen the Fox River area as a neighborhood-level commercial and residential district, and to improve connections to the downtown and Fox River. These goals are to be achieved through an integrative and comprehensive strategy that leverages public resources to stimulate private investment. The total cost for the project is $273,400, with each party responsible for 50% of the total cost. City staff believes it is in the city's best interest to complete the charrette entitlement process, as this approach will ensure an inclusive community planning and review process that will result in a mutually agreed upon use and strategy for the redevelopment of the mill race in site, along with an improved gateway, improved economic conditions, stimulated commercial and residential growth, and an enhanced tax base. I also wanted to mention that typically you'll see charrettes done by a city who owns the property, and then once they go through the process, they would then engage RFPs to get a developer to come in and develop. So this is kind of unique in the sense that the city doesn't own the property, but yet they're looking to be a partner with the property owner and come up with a mutually agreeable plan. We do have, obviously, city staff here this evening. We have Dave Patzel from the Chaudine Family Foundation, and we also have a representative from Hitchcock Design Group here to answer any questions the council may have.
We have a motion by Marks and a second by Bruno to have this matter advanced to the floor. All of you have in your packet some significant details regarding this agreement. I'd open it up to the dais for any questions or comments regarding item 2A. Alderman Bruno.
Stephanie, if you could get into a little bit of the detail, just for clarity on the financing. Right now, TIF 3 doesn't have cash in the account, but we've got cash in
Correct.
TIF 2.
Correct. So since TIF 3 is a relatively new TIF, there hasn't been any increment developed, so there's no cash there yet. It's actually a negative balance right now. However, the TIF statutes allow for an adjacent TIF to basically loan the money to the TIF until it then generates that increment, and then you pay the other TIF back. So there is funds available within TIF 2.
Okay, so that, so our portion of this would be paid in its entirety through TIF monies.
Correct.
Had another question about, let's see, on page 9, section D, the triggers, basically, if the city falls down on this.
So, Mike, could you hit your microphone? I messed up by hitting mine, sorry about that.
Yeah, so page 9, section D, there's a trigger, which I think the intent is right and fair. Basically, if the city falls down on this, we end up paying for the entire charrette thing.
Yeah. I mean, so basically what it's saying is if the parties have come together, we've gone through the process, we've come to a preferred plan that everybody agrees upon, and then it comes to the city, and the city says, you know what, just kidding, we've changed our mind. We would now be responsible for all costs.
And that's absolutely fair. I do wonder, I think further in the text, there is, if the city fails to approve economic incentives deemed necessary for the preferred plan, which means incentives once construction starts, separate from this charrette, am I right? I'm wondering how, if Shodine Corp. Or the Shodine Foundation asks for $500,000, but we only offer $250,000, how do we arbitrate? Is that a failure on our part, that we would then have to, if we don't give them everything that's asked?
So it says deemed necessary. So that doesn't say everything that's asked for. It says that which is deemed necessary in order to make the preferred plan viable.
Excellent. Thank you. This is, this parcel is near and dear to my heart, and this is such a critical part of the Geneva Gateway. I think I feel morally obligated, since we have encumbered the property through landmarking, that we do put some skin in the game and make this happen. I don't know if that's the cheapest route we can go, but I'm on board with this agreement. Thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Radecki, then Alderman Ruby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You bring up some points, Mike, that, I probably have a different view of. But for the landmarking of this property, we wouldn't be sitting here contemplating spending $137,000 of taxpayers' money, and also asking a philanthropic family foundation, a charitable foundation, to also pony up $137,000. The only reason that I think we're sitting here is because we chose to approve landmark status for that. To me, it's no secret to people here that, when people have disinterested people, and when I say disinterested, I mean by financial disinterest in a property, if we're going to embolden people to be able to go ahead and landmark a property and cause these type of encumbrances that are going to generate these type of expenses, it has been and will be for the next 3 weeks my position that the applicants should bear that. If there's going to be, the applicants for the landmark status should bear those costs. I think it's unconscionable that we go to the citizens now to say that since a third party that has no financial interest in the property encumbers it, and now we have to pay this money to come up with a design plan. So I just think it's fundamentally wrong. I think that the people that were the applicants for the landmark should bear those costs, just as I think with creating historic districts or any of that, those costs that are associated with people who have a passion for something. It's near and dear to your heart, Mike. A lot of people don't share that. an awful lot of people don't share that. There's a small group of people, in my opinion, that share that. But now we're asking a majority of people and taxpayers to foot that bill for people to find other things near and dear to their heart that not a lot of the taxpayers do. And I'm elected as a representative and a voice of my people, and trust me, I hear tremendous feedback about that property and why it was landmarked and why it still stands there. So, you know, I get that there's another view here, that this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to do something great, but I think that there would have been an opportunity for the developer to go ahead and do something. They have a proven track record of doing great things, not only here, but in multiple state venues, and it would have been fine to allow them to proceed with that property without the encumbrance. So just because of my fundamental beliefs in the process, that I thought that it was not fair from the beginning, in good conscience, I couldn't go ahead and approve spending this kind of money on taxpayers back to further what I think is something that should have been stopped a long time ago. So thank you for the time. Thank you.
Alderman Ruby.
Thank you. I was curious, the paragraph that Alderman Bruno referenced, page 9, paragraph D. My understanding of this is that we're approving the plan. We're saying that we're going to approve the preferred plan. Basically, we're guaranteeing that the city will approve everything without knowing anything about what the preferred plan is.
No, the city is actually involved in the process, so the preferred plan is a plan that comes out of the process that all the parties agree to. So the city is part of that process.
Okay, so we're not, this is
We're at the
not-
same table.
Okay, so this doesn't mean whatever comes out of the charrette.
Yeah, well, what comes out of the charrette through that whole 5-day iterative process, and when Hitchcock goes back and puts all the numbers and everything together, we've all agreed that this is the preferred plan. Both sides agree. This
Okay.
is what we want to see built here.
So will that come to council again at
Yeah.
that point? Okay.
And that's what it's saying. It's saying, if we've all agreed this is the preferred plan, and now it's before the council, and all of a sudden the council says, no, we don't like that preferred plan now.
Okay.
That's
So-
what would trigger that paragraph.
So will council be presented with multiple options, or is
You'll
it?
participate in part of the charrette.
Okay,
And
Okay.
I don't know if David or David.
Good evening. Yes, so through the charrette process, you'll have.
David, is your microphone on? There you go.
Yes. So through the charrette process, you'll have different design alternatives that are presented and evaluated. And as you kind of weigh pros and cons of those options, you build consensus over what would be the preferred plan, and that's what comes out of the charrette.
okay. And the costs of the planning, what are some of the reasons for the costs? What services are we getting for the costs? What are we paying for exactly?
So when you compare it to like the typical entitlement process where the developer is preparing plans, in their office and where the community's not really plugged in, they submit an application and then we hold a public hearing and you kind of have the back and forth begin at that point. With the charrette, you're engaging the community very early on in the process. There is no plan that's already been prepared. You're doing public outreach, you're getting them involved, inviting them to 4 meetings in 4 days to provide their input, but to also share information with them so they understand what the market realities are for different types of projects, to understand what the site constraints are, whether it's being along the Fox River or being on 2 state highways, and make sure everybody has that same information and expectations on what's realistic for the property.
Okay. So similar concept to the strategic plan, community involvement.
Right, but with more detail.
Okay,
Yeah.
but with a third party initiating and,
The engagement process,
Right.
right, and the third party, their team also would include professional engineers, market experts, architects,
okay.
to help us.
Is there any preliminary information available that can be shared?
So if this contract is entered into, there will be a public outreach program that will be put together that will include all the kind of base information. The consultant will be collecting that from us, our adopted plans, plats of survey, site conditions, all of that.
Will there be ideas presented to get like, to get the conversation started? Or are you strictly looking for ideas from the public? Or, will people be asked to choose an option?
I mean, I don't know if you want to jump in, Rick, but once we have all that information, we'll be doing key person interviews with
Okay.
up to, I think it was 20, 25 people. That'll kind of help frame the conversation too for the public meetings.
Good evening, Mayor and Aldermen and Alderwomen. Rick Hitchcock, Hitchcock Design Group. The process is somewhat similar to what you might go through in a typical comprehensive plan, except it's compressed into a much smaller time frame. And with the intention is that you have the key decision makers present, sometimes literally in the room, all at the same time, so that as ideas are coming forward, they can be advanced or sort of vetted, if you will, and advanced, or they can be dismissed rather quickly, so you don't have days, weeks, months go by between the conversations. So the intention is that there's a way to create a baseline of common understanding and facts so that all of the participants are kind of operating off of the same script. And then, yes, there will be choices, and those choices will emerge early on the second day of the charrette, and they'll be back and forth, and we'll take what we call the promising opportunities and push those a little harder and start to give them a little bit more definition and refinement. And what we're calling the local team, for lack of a better description, key representatives from both parties, from the city and from the foundation, will be reviewing our work on a daily basis. And so while it's impossible to guarantee any outcome, certainly the intention of everybody going in, especially considering frankly, the resources being applied to this and the attention being given to it, the idea is that a consensus is absolutely the intention coming out of it. So we have, other than we know the overall dimensions of the site, and we've read a little bit about the history of it, we don't come in with any preconception about land use or layout or appearance at all, other than our preconception about the process. And it's our intention to promote it vigorously, be an advocate and sort of an intermediary for both groups, if you will, and provide like I said, a common set of facts and sort of a portal, if you will, that the public can engage with all of us, the city representatives and the Shodine representatives, as the process moves along. So, in a nutshell, by July 1st, if we're able to stick to the schedule, by July 1st, we're going to have a very good idea about, again, for lack of a better term, what we keep calling the preferred strategy or preferred option, something that both sides are feeling very strongly about, that they want to advance. And then there'll be plenty of opportunities for a more formal, more traditional maybe format once we get past that point, to where it would come to different bodies in the city, plan commission, and so on, and advance to the city council.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Alderman Swanson.
I have a couple questions to start out with. The first is why this particular item needed to be a special committee of the whole meeting, and why it could not be in the normal process to allow people to have time for public comment.
Sure. As I indicated, obviously, we've been working for a long time getting the proposals and negotiating, but we had set out a timeline to get this charrette done before the summer really kicked off and people are gone on vacation, to ensure the greatest number of people are available. So that was, in order to keep that schedule, that's why it's presented this way.
Second question, is the entire property included in the charrette? And that would be the landmark piece, the corner building, and the entire parking lot. So it's the entire
Yes.
building, okay. And then my final question is related to what Alderman Ruby and Bruno mentioned with paragraph D. It seems that if we agree to this agreement now, we are agreeing to pay whatever necessary economic incentives are deemed appropriate. And I guess the problem I have is if you go back to paragraph C, where it talks about coming up with these economic incentives, we are approving paying an amount that is unknown. So it's kind of an open checkbook, if you will, that we have no idea what we're approving at this point. And if we don't approve it now and come up with, just a hypothetical, there's going to be a $2 million economic incentive, and then decide that's too much, then we're on the hook for the entire cost of the charrette. So I guess my question is, how do we limit what exposure there is with respect to economic incentives?
So in that paragraph C, it says that economic incentives determined necessary to bring forth a preferred plan. So if the consensus is around a preferred plan and it requires some incentive, that's where the negotiations start, and that starts before the entitlement process. So if the city council does not want to provide further assistance, there would likely be modifications made to that preferred plan at that point, and that's part of the negotiation. Or if they want to provide, to eliminate the incentive or to reduce it to an amount that the council is comfortable with. So once those negotiations have been completed and we have a preferred plan with an incentive the council is comfortable with, then you begin the entitlement process. So that paragraph D proceeds or follows that.
So you're saying the preferred plan will not be completed until we know what the incentives are? So there will be nothing to vote on, so if we balk at an amount of incentives, then that will not be the preferred plan, we go back
There
to
would need to be some modifications.
continue the discussions to come up with it.
Correct.
So there is a way for us to limit what exposure there are for economic incentives.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Kilberg, and then Alderman Burgert.
Just a couple questions. What are our balances in TIF 1 and 2 at the present time? Would anyone have an idea or approximately?
TIF 1, I don't know, and TIF 1, we wouldn't,
Right.
can't do it. And TIF 2, Kathleen, I think, has that number, actually. That's why.
That's why you have staff.
Thank you. So TIF 2 is 1,207,95. And did you ask about 3?
I know 3 doesn't have anything. Do we have anything currently pending that might require TIF 2 funding?
Yeah, TIF 2, we're looking at the East State Street project.
Right,
But
I
again, the timing of that and the timing of this, we believe there's still,
In other words, this
Adequate
isn't going
funds.
to put anything as it relates to those plans in jeopardy?
no.
No, we don't believe so.
Okay. Good. Okay, also, the gentleman from Hitchcock, could you share with the council an example of a charrette that would be comparable to what we're possibly undertaking here that you might reference, that how that processed and
Sure.
what was the successful conclusion? Just a synopsis, just, I think the community doesn't really have a lot of history with charrette.
Sure.
And I think when we're looking at over $250,000 involved here, I think helping bring the community along as to how these funds are going to be employed and where this process has worked successfully in the past, I think they would have an interest in.
Sure, fair question. I can't comment on how it maybe has been used by others, and to be sure, you're correct that this is uncommon. It's not uncommon in planning and design, to be sure, to have a charrette process that's part of something that's influencing public policy or public resource investment. But in this circumstance, to have a developer teamed with a municipality to effectively co-sponsor the charrette is uncommon. And candidly, we've not done any exactly like that, which is partly why it is intriguing to us. However, that said, we have done probably dozens, I couldn't count how many charrettes, typically a little shorter, but in most projects of some significant consequence in municipalities, large and small, we almost always have at least one, maybe two workshops where we have We invite the public, the general public, we invite key stakeholders that we identify mutually, we invite city representatives, and of course, owners and businesses. And so there's a lot of people in the tent, I guess is the simple way to put it. And we have found that it's extremely valuable because what happens is that you get a lot of ideas compressed into a small period of time. Instead of having people go back and then come together again a month later, or and people forget some of the details and the reasoning behind their consensus building. In this case, when it's compressed, it's a little easier to achieve consensus. I will tell you the most recent that we've done. We've actually done 2 projects in Kankakee County in the last 12 months. One on the Route 50 corridor, which involves 3 different jurisdictions, 2 municipalities, the county, state entities, lots of private businesses. So it's a complex environment. The outcome so far has been very good. We're right in the middle of that. We also did one on the Kankakee riverfront, and a very large-scale project, but we were able to get a lot of people who really weren't maybe getting along especially well early on in the process. I'm not saying that they're all singing Kumbaya at the moment, but they all started to see that the value proposition was common to all of them. And again, with common set of facts on the table, I think they were able to rally around a strategy very well. But we've done that process, my goodness, in DeKalb and in St. Charles and many, many other places. So.
I looked through your materials and this proposal. I guess my question is, I want to make sure the community understands this is a lot more involved than you're much more than just a facilitator for a 4-day interaction between the Shodine Foundation and the city.
That's a fact.
And if you want to elaborate a little bit on some of the things that go way beyond those 4 days, I think that's important as well.
That's an excellent point. And so often, and we've witnessed and participated in some as, well, not as the prime consultant, but as an outside interest, where they simply have a facilitator, and somehow the facilitator's like the master of ceremonies trying to direct traffic, and like somehow the idea is going to emerge out of thin air and everyone's going to rally around it. That's not the case here. I'm trained in public facilitation and in charrette management, but frankly, beyond that, we've got a team of urban planners, urban designers, market economics expert. We've got civil engineer, water resources engineer, architecture. So we've got a lot of professionals on the team who have experience working for both municipalities and for private sector businesses, developers primarily. And so we understand how the process works, and so we are absolutely adding our opinion and influence and expertise in increments at the appropriate times along the way. I have to kind of wear 2 hats when I'm facilitating, especially with the public. It is our responsibility to not dismiss ideas, even though in the back of my mind I may think, gosh, I'm not sure that's going to work. We're not interested in squashing ideas, and especially not interested in squashing public expression at any point in the process. So we know how to listen, harvest the information, and try to correct inaccuracies along the way. We can't make people have an opinion one way or the other. But if we hear someone saying something that is simply incorrect, we can, again, try to create the facts that will help to at least stabilize the conversation. So appreciate your asking that. That's very astute.
One last question related to that. When you have a situation like this, you usually have a group or an opinion within the community that's very passionate about one direction. How do you facilitate the charrette so that one energy within the process doesn't dominate and really drive or overpower common sense?
Great question, without an especially easy answer. At different levels, I will say this. So for instance, in a public forum, a workshop setting, if someone tries to take over or dominate a conversation, you know, we get to be the police and kind of get everybody reorganized and give everybody a fair shot. And we have the tools, and we'll have a technique so that it facilitates that kind of conversation. Now, as we advance, every community has folks who just love to hear themselves talk, and somebody will get up at the microphone and talk about the history of Geneva, I'm pretty sure. And when that happens, you know, I guess that's sort of an occupational hazard. We will listen thoughtfully and make sure that we're understanding what they're saying. And again, if there's inaccuracies, we'll try to correct them. And if it's a matter of opinion and they disagree with particularly the consensus that the group is starting to gel around, then we'll simply we'll end up recommending to you all eventually whatever that position looks like, and we'll say, you know, there will be some viewpoints that disagree with the suggestion or the recommendations, but we would feel like we'd have strong consensus, not only from city representatives, key representatives, and all kinds of other folks who might come forward, plus Shodine representatives, plus all of the professional design talent that would be on the projects. And if we've got all three of those groups rallying around an idea, I would feel very confident standing in front of all of you later in July, say, and saying, you know, here it is, and we are wholeheartedly support that, and we are tireless advocates for our clients. And in this circumstance, which is kind of uncommon, we've got kind of a two-headed client in a way at the one level, but we really do view it as we've got your community is our client, and so we're trying to do something that makes sense for everybody, including folks who have a direct financial interest and folks who maybe simply drive by it on the way to work in the morning.
Thank you.
Sure.
I had a question for Dave Patzell, if he would be kind enough to take the podium. Explain why this is a process that Shodine is prepared to participate in, and I assume this is unique to your organization, that you've never done anything quite like this?
Your last statement is 100% correct. It's our first time at this. It's clearly a different approach, and something that was rather interesting or intriguing. I'll say that I first heard about it from David. Why would we want to take this approach? I think the answer to that is the intent is that this 5 days, if you're not going to participate, or somebody, whether in this room or outside this room, don't come on the 7th or 8th day and say, I don't like it because of this. You're too late to the party. The party's over. So in my opinion, the response, Alderman, to your question about is the council going to be able to see it, yes, you will, but your time for input is on those 5 days. If you're void or you're absent those 5 days and then say that you want to see something else, again, I think the response is going to be party ended. This is the plan. So we're interested in trying it to see if there's some community spirit and that can build consensus to this and have the answer come to the surface, whatever it may be. Admittedly, I think we are also somewhat, I'll say, in our four walls of our own building, confused as to what that site should be. And so we're hoping that this kind of community spirit team, everybody throwing out ideas, works. I'd like to, so hopefully I've answered that question for you. a different way of answering the question about the economics. Typically, when a developer does a project and is requesting an incentive, developer prepares a plan, brings it forward, developer brings a pro forma and says, this pro forma shows that but for a financial incentive from the community, we're not going to make a certain target return for the project. One of the, I've heard, we know there's going to be architects, planners, engineers all sitting in the room, but I don't know if you also heard or read that there's a financial person sitting in the room. And that's a third-party financial person that's not our financial person. So literally that person's going to sit over in the corner and somebody says, I want a rocket ship landing pad. She's going to go over there and she's going to say, okay, it costs so much to build a rocket ship landing pad, and we're going to get fees of each rocket ship that's going to land there, and guess what? It doesn't make any money. City, if you really want that, you got to put up a lot of money to fund that rocket ship landing pad. So that's one of the key components. It's great to be able to draw, design, and think of what you want, but then the other side is, can you afford it, and can it generate any revenue and pay for it? So that person, to me, although it's one person, we've interviewed her, and she has said, I'm going to sit quietly in the corner, and people are going to throw ideas at me, and I'm going to be putting them into spreadsheets and trying to figure out what the costs are. So, yes, at the end of that 5 days, not only is there going to be a pretty picture, but a use as well as a financial incentive package, and that but-for answer is already going to be on that platter as the city administrator had described it for you.
That's really all I had. I appreciate the Shodene's willingness to move forward with the redevelopment of that area, and that if this process serves a purpose, and if we can reach some type of a consensus and get something started at some point in time here in the not-too-distant future, that would be fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and we don't know what is going to come out of it. So it's kind of intriguing, and will be interesting to us to see what comes out of it. So.
Alderman Clements, then Alderman Maladra.
Thank you, Mayor. So, just so that I understand this correctly and so that everybody hears it, we've talked a lot about the risks associated on our end, on the city's end, that if certain things are triggered, we would be up for the entire amount of this. On the same page, page 9, section E, if I am reading this correctly, that there are provisions where Shodene would also end up having to pay us their half as well. So they have a poker in the fire here too. Put it simply, if you don't start building what we all decide on within 18 months, short of some act of God, you would have to pay. You would have to pay.
Yep.
So everybody's got risk involved in potentially paying for this entire thing. It's not just the city. And so we have a timeline here too. So we know within 18 months we would actually start to see something moving, correct?
That's exactly. The intent is to whatever, at the end of the 5 days, to build it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Alderman Maladra.
I wanted to key off of something that Dave said, or at least the characterization that he brought. So regardless of how we got here, the fact is we have this property that's very critical to our downtown. The city would like to see it developed. The community would like to see it developed in such a way that it adds additional value, but also respects the history and all that other stuff. If this were our own property, I think we would be engaging in exactly this type of exercise. The fact that it's landmarked, yeah, that was a difficult debate, but it's also water under the bridge. It is something that we need to recognize and deal with at this point. So rather than looking at this as a burden, I look at it as an exciting opportunity to engage the community once again, as we've done many times over, not in the development of a specific site necessarily, but in our strategic planning efforts, in our downtown master plan effort. I sort of seem to remember doing something similar in Dotson Place. But once again, to engage the community and trying to define what's going to work best in that location. I think that as far as incentives are concerned, this is a very critical property within a TIF district, and the use of TIF funding for this type of exercise is perfectly in line with what those things are intended for. There may be people who like or don't like TIFs, but again, the fact is the TIF is there. It exists. We should take advantage of it. And then as far as the things that trigger the city having to pay for it all or the developer having to pay for it all, it's a joint exercise, people. I really think that, we're not going to agree to incentives we can't afford. He's not going to agree to a rocket pad they can't afford. This is a collaborative exercise. This is about as good as it gets in terms of collaboration, and I'm pretty excited to see it start. Thanks.
Anyone else from the dais? Before I recognize Alderman Ruby for a second time, I'll defer to Alderman Burkhart.
My question's for Mr. Hitchcock. As it's been referenced, we do have a nationally historic landmarked property. Does that concern you going into this?
Well, it does a little bit because it's another layer. I will tell you, I don't know that it concerns me any more than the Department of Natural Resources or IDOT, because they all concern me as well. Maybe more so. I'm not a preservation expert, and so the very last thing I want to do is blow any smoke at you. We have someone on the team who is expert in that arena, which is great. A colleague of the market economics person, and we also have on the architecture team we have a subspecialty who's expert in structural, and we've got folks who are expert in historic preservation as well. So anyway, we've got the boxes checked, if you will, so that we know that we've got the expertise to at least understand what all the facts are and interpret them as best as we can. So that's it.
Could you see a vision where you say, if this wasn't landmarked, this is the thing that the community would, because we're going to certainly hear that from the community who says they would like to see, they don't have any attachment to that. They
Right.
see it as a kind of jumble of bricks or stones, and
From
that could be a
folks,
voice.
I'm sorry, from folks who are experts, from what I understand, just in the very narrowly defined, we might have sort of three avenues. One is complete rehabilitation to some pristine condition. The other is, of course, demolish it and put a plaque up and say it was here at one time, or somehow incorporate some or all of it into some new useful purpose that we haven't figured out yet. And so that's exactly the way we'll approach it. And if there's 4 and 5 other options, we'll pursue those as well.
Have you worked in Geneva before?
Yes, we were the landscape architects for the 3rd Street makeover. In fact, that's the answer to the question about if we've ever done a charrette. That was one of my first charrettes, and if any of you who are old enough to, Mayor Burns maybe remembers
Why are you
that.
singling me out, for God's sake?
Your hair isn't white enough, but I do remember that you were on the council at the time. But anyway, so we've worked up and down the Fox River for years, and we have worked in Geneva.
And could you talk about the timeline,
Sure.
I see that, when this kind of compressed 4 or 5 days, when is that envisioned to?
Yeah, David DeGroot was, I think it was he who answered about the schedule, or I'm sorry, it was the administrator, Stephanie, and absolutely appropriate answer, which is we are really eager to get the charrette accomplished by July 1st, and it's not like we turn into pumpkins or the earth falls off its axis, but it practically does for about 60 days. And so it's, with all of the interest and frankly, all the financial stake here, it's very important that we get this accomplished before the 4th of July. And with Swedish days and other things going on, June's a real complicated month, so we got a couple little narrow windows we're trying to fit in. And because it's a very labor-intensive process, we have to find some clear space to actually do the event. But there's all kinds of work before the event, so we can be ready to do it skillfully. And then there's all kinds of work after the event. The good news is we can run off and do that in July and not bother anybody. But we really need to get our work going and hit this. We picked out and we're going to work, of course, with David and Kathleen, and well, both Davids and everybody, to figure out precisely the right days to do this in. But we've picked out a window that seems like it makes sense between council meetings and other events in town. So we hope we're going to finesse that schedule. The one thing I can guarantee you for sure is that we're not going to start on April 1st, because that day came and went. But with a couple of tiny tweaks, we can get caught up pretty quickly.
That's what, I guess I was wondering about Swedish days, and which sounds
Yeah,
like a
no,
very Mayberry thing to say, but.
No, it's a great thing. In fact, we view it as a really uncommon opportunity, to be right out in the public. I mean, I don't expect people lined up to see what we're doing quite like they might to sample some other things. But it's a great chance to be out in the public and show folks who might really not otherwise have an interest or even know. They might stumble into something that they find very interesting.
What about in terms of day, will you have some evening events? Because obviously
yes.
some people work full-time or in the city or.
Again, as presently conceived, and it is not finalized by any stretch, but as presently conceived, it's 4 full days and 4 nights. And so it's 4 pretty sleepless days for the consultant team. But the evenings are intended to be for greater general public engagement. It would be on the second night, the first day of the charrette, a bunch of discussions with key stakeholders. The first evening is a general public event, so that's intended to draw a pretty big group, which I suspect we will. The next day is intended to be, we huddle and we're starting to get some ideas knocked around and we're reviewing them with the local team. The following day, once we're putting some things together that we think really make sense in a complete package, I'm glad others have asked about that. We try to avoid using the term plan because there's plans and plans and there's plans, and we call it strategy because it's intended to be layers of everything. It's not just a drawing about land use and where sidewalks are and things like that. It's intended to be a strategy about what's going on there, how the finances might work, the timeline that it might be put in place. So it's a complete thought. It's a complete business proposition. We're putting that together, and then on the third evening we have an open house. So literally 2 evenings after we have our first, hey, everybody, here's what we're doing, here's the history, here's all the information that we know, what are your opinions, and we harvest all of that information. Literally 2 nights later, we have things up around the room and a presentation where we're saying, here's the direction we're kind of leaning, because it sure seems like these things are making sense, and we'll get reaction, we're sure, from the public at that time. There'll be other forums as well along the way, and certainly once we cross over into the more traditional advancing this through the entitlement process, there'll be all the usual checkpoints with historic sites and plan commission and council and so on. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for folks to be heard other than in the middle of the day when they might be earning a living somewhere.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great question.
Thanks, helpful. This is probably for the city attorney. It sounds like it's going to be important for all of us as aldermen to offer input during this charrette. So will this be run as a public meeting so that we don't have to hear open meeting? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alderman Marks?
Is that how we are involved as a council at every meeting, or are we separate, or how does that work, Stephanie? Is it a full council, is it a few members?
Say it's probably a little bit of everything, but again, I'm going to defer.
I think it's a little bit of everything, and that was a very astute comment. Is like, I would say if you can, I would try to leave the week of June 24th kind of empty to the extent that you can, because we will surely want to talk with each alderman individually. All of those discussions are confidential. So we won't ever attribute what we hear in a confidential discussion. You just say, well, Alderman Marks says, he would never do this. We just won't do that. But we'll aggregate that information and say, here are things that we heard from, talking with each of you individually. We would certainly hope that as many of you as possible could participate in both of the evening workshops. And again, I hope I got the dates picked right here, but which is Monday, I believe the 24th, and then it would be Wednesday, the 26th. During the course of the day, I don't know that it would be so crucial for this group to be around, but we wouldn't turn you away either. I always know how to keep our clients happy, and you are our client, and so if you want to talk to me, you will have my ear rather quickly.
Thank you. Just a little clarification how we got involved.
Alderman Ruby, then Alderman Bruno.
Thank you. I had those questions as well. So just one more, indulge me, worst-case scenario game, 1 second. If Shodine, who is very successful and has had decades of experience in this, can't come up with a home run idea, what if nobody in the public can either? What if we don't get any great ideas from the charrette? I know there's no way to know what ideas are going to come out of this, but what if nothing solid
I can't
comes out
guarantee
of
that
it?
you'll think that they're great, but I can guarantee you that you'll get ideas from us that we think are totally appropriate and that respect the resources, respect the stakeholders, all of them, and are appropriate in a very complicated marketplace, which suggests a great deal of flexibility. I can't pretend to know what's going to happen 10 years from now. And so we need to be thinking about that. Really, that's the respectful part for everybody. But we will absolutely bring ideas forward, and we will surely hear things from the public that we didn't think about or didn't think about in a certain way that will influence our suggestions. But I can assure you that you will have, because it's our responsibility for our mutual clients, we will come together, we will put together ideas that we think make sense for both parties.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Bruno.
Thank you, Mayor. I should probably add some clarity. I think Alderman Radecki rightly picked on some of my ambiguity when I say near and dear. This whole parcel is near and dear to me, regardless of whether the Millrace Inn stands there or not, just because of its community value and economic value. But I want to key off something that Alderman Burkhart said about I believe you referenced the viability of restoring the building. As I've said during this whole process, even when we went through the landmarking, there isn't a guarantee that this historic building will remain after this. It may come up that it's just not economically viable. And we have, and this is why we landmarked, so we could have that super in-depth discussion. But I think the public should be clear that, or should understand that this isn't a design charrette to guarantee that we save that building. It is a design charrette to see what can be done, if anything, with that building and the entire parcel. Thanks.
Anyone else on the dais? Anyone from the audience? Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. My name is Colin Campbell, 18 South 6th Street. I just wanted to clarify a few things. First, In terms of the charrette, in terms of planning for the city, I think this is one of the greatest opportunities for development that Geneva has come across in a long time. That piece of property, which I think has generally been acknowledged here, the entire piece of property, is one of the potential gems of the city. We have talked in our planning, the downtown master plan, the SPAC priorities plans, all sorts of plans. What can be done to enhance our access to the river? That's an opportunity sitting there at that corner. What can be done to provide a beautiful, attractive gateway to the shopping district? Because once you come over the bridge, you are in the shopping district. That's another thing that can be done with that property. There's so many opportunities there. And I think that the city idea of having this charrette and involving the community, which we have done before, and with a lot of success. It's not being that 22,000 people are going to show up, I hope, but those who are interested will be here, and they will come here with their ideas and their commitments. And I think that this is an excellent investment for the city. And this is what cities are doing now when they want development, when they want a new business. Look what's gone on across the country for the Amazon second headquarters. We're not talking about that kind of money. But the principle is the same, that the city and the developer work together for the benefit of both. And the mutual benefit is what is important. And so I hope that we go ahead with the charrette and go ahead with that plan. And along with what was said here a moment ago by Alderman Bruno, I wanted to clarify two things. When we asked that the 1846 mill race building be landmarked so that it wouldn't be torn down immediately, it was never our intention to say it can never be torn down. We just wanted time to try and find alternatives for it. And the alternative, as you said, may be that it's not viable. Okay, but at least we will have had time for the discussion. Unfortunately, the property that sits on is the entire mill race property. That's one tax number, so we had to landmark the entire property, which would affect, any development there. So my question to you, and Ms. Dawkins, you may be able to help us, or our city attorney. The owner, the foundation, could they subdivide that property, split the historic building off as the landmarked piece, and then designate the other part of the property as a new tax number and leave that unencumbered?
I'll refer to my land use guy.
Potentially, yes, it could, and, but I think that's something that would come at kind of the end of the charrette when we have a preferred plan to understand what that is. If it's preserving that building as it sits, it might make sense to subdivide it off and unencumber the rest of the property.
But it is legally possible?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second part of that would be, if the charrette decides that there's really no viable use for that building, it can be demolished. The city council can reverse the landmarking on it. Okay, so this doesn't depend on that building. This depends on the property and the whole development process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else joining us this evening? We have several calls on hold. Anyone else on the dais? We have a motion. We have a motion. We have a second. Mr. Clerk, could I trouble you to take the roll call?
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
Radecki.
Nay.
Swanson.
Aye.
The item passes with eight affirmative votes, 1 nay vote, 1 absent. Mr. Hitchcock, good to see you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Patzall, thank you, sir. Item 2B, under the Special Committee of the Whole, is to consider resolution number 2019-41, authorizing execution of a change order number 2 with J. Congdon Sewer Services for 2018-2019 water main rehabilitation project, increasing the total contract amount to $821,274.76, and allow the city administrator to approve up to $20,000 in change orders for a total not to exceed $841,274.76.
So moved.
Motion by Kilberg. Seconded by Marks.
So this one will be brief. You were somewhat briefed last Monday under new business, and then in your packet tonight is a memo kind of outlining the unforeseen circumstances that has necessitated a change order. And again, we had an initial contingency, but then we ran into more issues. So as a result, the resolution this evening authorizes change order number 2, authorizing the city administrator to approve up to an additional $20,000 in change orders, bringing the total not to exceed project amount to $841,274.76. I have Director Babica and Superintendent Van Gescam both here this evening if you have any additional questions.
Questions or comments from the dais? Alderman Marks.
Stephanie's probably for you. Is this coming out of the water fund?
That is correct.
This is the water fund. It's not a general fund
No.
expenditure? Okay.
Anyone else? Alderman Clemens.
Just a little clarification, just to explain exactly what happened again. Like what?
Stephanie, you want to handle that? Or?
No, I'm going to leave it up to my professionals, Director Babica and Superintendent Van Gescam.
Under the rubric of some 24 years ago.
God bless you. You want to take a roll and then I'll jump in if I have to?
Sure. Well, I guess it first started with identifying some problematic areas along Western Avenue that we found out when the contractor started to mobilize. And we all got together on site, determined that there were a couple problems going on. One was that we had on the north side is where the planned large excavation was going to be for the boring pit. And it was problematic in the fact that we had overhead ComEd lines to deal with, and also that we had roughly 6 to 8 mature pine trees that were in the way that would have had to have been taken out. So we thought about, different scenarios that we could do to accomplish our goal of having to relocate the water main and get the casing pipe under there. So ultimately, we looked at the south side of the railroad tracks, kind of just reversing the construction method. It became probably the best alternative for us to make sure that the work got completed. Problem is number one, we were now on Park District property. So we had to get authorization from them, which they granted to us. But we also came across a large tree on Park District property that we had to move farther south to make sure that we didn't damage that tree and make sure that we get our project in and taken care of. So that was part of the problems that came up. Second issue right south of there was we're going to connect the water main on Cheever that runs east-west to the 12-inch water main that's on the west side of Western Avenue. Okay, it's in the Parkway. So in order to do that, we're going to directionally drill underneath Western Avenue and connect onto that water main. When the contractor did his preliminary work of uncovering some utilities that were there, they came across a large AT&T fiber duct package. So that was at the same level as the water main. So it would be impossible to connect the two right there. So they had to now go deeper, which required extra man hours, extra shoring, those kind of things to be able to accomplish that. That was the second part of it. Third part that we came across was about 1,000 feet to the west of the Western Avenue. We have another area of water main that needs to be relocated out of the new right-of-way for the railroad. When we called for Julie Locates to kind of get an idea of what was going on out in that area and find out really where the new right-of-way was going to be staked out, we identified a situation to where the existing 16-inch transmission main, our water main, that was going to be connected onto for this part of this project is located about 3 feet underneath the maintenance building for the golf course. So number 3, we've got to relocate that out of from underneath that building and relocate it, which added about 100 feet of 16-inch water main to the project. So in a nutshell, that's what we came across. So obviously nothing that we wanted to have happen.
2 weeks of my life.
Oh, thank you very much. Kind of sounds like you're putting in like a deep sea oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico.
We have a
But
excuse
you know,
me, go ahead, Mr.
kudos to the contractor too. He's been working with us, been very patient and you know, understands that unfortunately these things do come up, but you know, it's one of those things to where we all work together to try to resolve the problem.
Alderman Bruno.
Thank you, Mayor. It's safe to presume, I would think that once we expose all these undocumented locations, that we're entering all this in the GIS.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We have a motion by Kilberg, a second by Marks. All in favor of item 2B, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, item number 3 is to request a motion to go into closed session to discuss the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the public body. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Bruno, second by Alderman Marks. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart. Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Maladra. Marks.
Aye.
Radecki.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
The motion passes with 9 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 1 absent. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be no more than 5 minutes, and we will have action upon our return. I'll entertain a motion from one of the council members, or excuse me, committee members to return to open session.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Marks, seconded by Alderman Clemmons. I believe a voice vote is sufficient. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are back in open session, ladies and gentlemen. Item 4A, ladies and gentlemen, is to consider resolution number 2019-42, declaring certain real property surplus and authorizing conditions for sale. And this matter requires 8 affirmative votes with the chairman and/or mayor of the committee voting. Is there a motion? Motion by Alderman Marks, seconded by Alderman Ruby. Do you want to provide any summary on this, Ms. Dawkins? Mr. Clerk, whenever you are ready, please take the roll.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
Radecki.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
And I will vote as well.
And Burns.
And I vote aye. So the matter, the motion passes rather with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 1 absent. Item number 5, folks, new business. Anyone from the public? Any comments, questions, new business to share with the council and anyone watching? From the dais? A motion to adjourn would be in order. Alderman Marks makes that motion.
Second.
Alderman Ruby makes the second. All in favor of adjourning this special committee of the whole meeting, please indicate by saying aye. I was waiting for you to click off your We are adjourned, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take a 1-minute break and switch over to the council meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, we convene this regularly scheduled city council meeting. The meeting is called to order. We kindly ask our city clerk to please take the roll.
Bruno.
Here.
Burkhart.
Here.
Clements.
Here.
Ruby.
Here.
Kilberg.
Here.
Maladra.
Here.
Marks.
Here.
Radecki.
Here.
Swanson.
Here.
And McGowan is still in Germany. We begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd like to ask our dear friend and Wood Award winner, Cookie Olson, to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Cookie. Item 4, folks, amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments this evening? Item 5 is the omnibus agenda. All items marked with an asterisk on this agenda can be considered as routine by this council, and all those matters may be considered with one motion. Is there such a motion? So moved. Alderman Marks makes the motion on the consent agenda. Second. Alderman Burkhart makes the second. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
Radecki.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
Motion passes with 9 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 1 absent. We skip down to item number 10, municipal bills for payment. We kindly ask our clerk to read the bills in their aggregate for our consideration.
Total bills are $3,746,881.93.
Mayor, I move that we approve and pay the bills as read. The individual items that add up to that amount can be found in tonight's city council packet on the city website.
Alderman Bruno makes the motion to pay the bills which are available in our packets and on the city's website. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Clements. Questions or comments regarding the bills? Mr. Clerk, whenever you're ready, please take the roll.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
Radecki.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
Motion passes with 9 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 1 absent. We skip down to item 12A, ladies and gentlemen. Approve Resolution 2019-40, approving a tax increment financing redevelopment agreement between the City of Geneva and the Chaudine Family Foundation for a planning charrette and entitlement project, and authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with Hitchcock Design Group to facilitate said planning charrette and entitlement project.
So moved.
Motion by, was that Alderman Bruno? Excuse me. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Alderman Marks. Questions or comments regarding this matter, folks, from the dais? Anyone in the audience? Mr. Clerk, whenever you're ready, please take the roll.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
Radecki.
Nay.
Swanson.
Aye.
Item 12A passes with 8 affirmative votes, 1 nay vote, and 1 absent. We skip down to item number 12B, approve resolution number 2019-41, authorizing the execution of a change order number 2 with J. Congdon Sewer Services for 2018-19 water main rehabilitation project, increasing the total contract amount to $821,274.76, and allowing the city administrator to approve up to $20,000 in change orders for a total not to exceed contract of $841,274.76.
So moved.
Motion by, with enthusiasm, Alderman Bruno, seconded by Alderman Swanson. Questions or comments? Would anyone like to hear the description as to why again? No? Okay. Mr. Clerk, whenever you're ready, take the roll.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
Radecki.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
Motion passes 8 affirmative votes, 1 absent, 0 nays.
9.
Correct, 9 affirmative votes, excuse me. 0 nays, 1 absent. Item number 12C is to approve resolution number 2019-42, declaring certain real property surplus and authorizing conditions for sale as In the special committee of the whole meeting, this requires 8 affirmative votes, and I will be voting as well. Is there a motion? Alderman Marks makes the motion. Alderman Clements makes the second. Questions, comments? Mr. Clerk, whenever you're ready.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart. Aye. Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
Radecki.
Aye.
Swanson. Aye. Burns.
Aye. Item 12C passes with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 1 absent. New business and public comment. Any new business from the dais? Alderman Kilberg.
Just to make the city aware, there will be a series of meetings over the next few weeks as it relates to the traffic committee, and anyone that would have an interest, the locations and dates are at the city's website.
And if I may add to that, there is an email address, 30mph@geneva.il.us, that residents can send their comments regarding traffic and pedestrian safety. And we also just launched a Survey Monkey. The link is on the website and also in last Friday's Geneva Mail, and it's open for 2 weeks. It's open till April 30th, and we encourage everybody to take that survey and also provide their comments there. Thank you.
The first meeting will actually be this Wednesday evening at the East Side Fire Station at 7 o'clock, right? Pardon me?
It's our third or fourth meeting.
Right, okay.
Anyone else in the dais? Anyone joining us this evening? A motion to adjourn would be in order. Alderman Marks makes the motion. Alderman Ruby makes the second. All in favor of adjourning this meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We're adjourned, folks.